I got to tell you, there's going to be an election coming up before you know it. And there's going to be a very hot race going on in the Democrat primary for United States Senator. You got your Arlen Specter, who is the incumbent, and you've got this contender. This guy named Joe Sestak. He's a congressman. He was elected to Congress in 2006, and a very impressive guy. I'm looking at his resume here. 31-year career in the United States Navy. 3-star admiral. Senior military veteran. He also earned a PhD in political economy and government. And after retiring from the Navy, his home is Delaware County, he has been representing that 7th District. He's my very special guest. So please welcome Joe Sestak to News Radio 1020 KDKA. How you doing, Joe?
Good, Dimitri. It's great to be here, and thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. So why do you want to be a United States Senator?
Very simple. First, I got into this congressional seat I have because I had to pay back a personal debt. My daughter had a brain tumor, the same as Senator Kennedy, and because of the health care I had in the military, even though we were told she had 3 to 9 months, she's here 4 years later. But I'm running for the U.S. Senate for a different reason. I'm running to change the lack of accountability, to replace compromise for deal-making with principle down in Washington, D.C., and to do what I've done in my district the last 3 years and apply it to Pennsylvania, where we keep my district office open 7 days a week and have handled 3 times the constituency cases of other congressional offices because people have not focused on the working family. Accountability with principle and working for people, not your own job, is why I'm running against Arlen Specter for the U.S. Senate. It's very simple. That's the reason.
Why are you a Democrat?
I'm a Democrat because I'm a very pragmatic person. Think about it. My 3 decades in the military, we invested in our sailors. Everyone had health care. When our warriors went to war, they were focused on that mission because their families were taken care of in health care, and the dividends to this nation were tremendous. What about a workforce where everyone's covered for health care and we don't lose the $160 billion a year in economic productivity we do today? Take second education. When I joined up during the Vietnam era, I had 5 chief petty officers. And, you know, Dimitri, those are those old gnarly guys that put their arms around you in the old days and said, "Come here, son, I'll teach you the ropes." Well, only one had graduated from high school, and that was mighty fine then. We were shooting missiles 25 miles. When I commanded the aircraft carrier battle group in the war in Afghanistan, my 19-and-a-half-year-old kids in the aircraft carrier were jamming satellites, cyberspace warfare, launching missiles 1,000 miles. And now, you know what? You can't be a senior chief petty officer when I had command of that ship unless you'd earn an associate's college degree in technology. We invested in education, we invested in healthcare, and the dividends were tremendous, and that's what I am a Democrat, to invest in our working class. But second, I've respected Republicans because the Republican Party used to bring accountability, fiscal and other, to Congress. But the last 8 years, Arlen Specter, with part of that GOP leadership, forgot about accountability and threw out a pay-as-you-go government. I became a Democrat to invest in people, but under an accountable way. I don't want to be responsible. I want to also be held accountable for what I do and what I vote, and you're always going to know where I stand.
Do you stand on pro-choice or pro-life?
I am very supportive of having a family make the decision of what they want.
Does that mean you're pro-life?
That means I want a woman to decide what she wants.
So then you're pro-choice.
I am. If you want to characterize pro-choice, I'm very pro-choice, much as a family should make their decisions, irregardless of government intervening. I want that family to make the choice.
Have you always been pro-choice?
Yes. I mean, when I was conscious of it, I could say, I think that we should absolutely try by all kinds of means to try to have no abortions or few abortions. But at the end of the day, when a woman has to make a challenging decision, I want it to be a private one between her and her doctor, her family, her savior, whoever it is. I believe it's finally her choice.
First trimester, second trimester, even partial birth?
No, I don't believe in partial birth. I think that should only be if it has to do with the life, the health of that woman, and life of that woman, or incest, or my belief is very strongly that on that.
Do you believe that federal taxpayers' money should be used to pay for abortions?
No, and that's why the Hyde Amendment I'm supportive of. And it's why we had the Hyde Amendment requirements in the health care bill that we passed in the House side. That if someone is to be in a health care plan, but they get subsidies to help pay for their premiums, their private premiums payment is the only way, and to be placed in a segregated escrow account, and only that private money can be used. The Hyde Amendment was a principled compromise. Look, I respect those on the other side. I probably I met with 3-4 groups who believe differently just about 2 months ago in my office. 2 outside my office because they had such large crowds, and 2 inside the office. I have great respect on this issue for the other side, but I believe that that therefore this Hyde Amendment is what should prevail. That private money only should be used for such a choice.
Is this a core belief of yours, Joe?
It's a great question because it is what I believe. I don't know. I watched the Supreme Court decision and studied it in Roe versus Wade, and I believe they did make the right decision there. By core, yeah, if I believe it, I think everything I should speak out on should be part of my beliefs, yes.
All right. So tell me about is it Bart Stupak, your fellow congressman?
Yes, I liked Bart and Joe Pitts, who district adjourns mine. It's really called the Stupak-Pitts Amendment. Is that the same? Is that the same as the Hyde, essentially the Hyde Amendment? No, they changed it, and that's why it went too far. And by the way, I work with Bart on many issues, and Joe a little bit, but not quite as many issues, and have very high respect for them. But we disagree on this. In this case, they did not want the monies to be segregated. If a woman was in a plan and she was getting some subsidies, she would have to, even though she was paying private money for that, she could not use that money, even if it was segregated, for her choice. And so, therefore, she would have to pay additional money in order to either get a rider or to get something on that. And so, as you and I know, that would impact principally the lower income. And the Hyde Amendment said only private money. And so, therefore, I felt that we had worked a very good principled compromise, not a compromise on deal-making like the Senate did in their health bill and embarrassed this nation and how they did that deal-making at the end of the Senate, but on principle, where both sides had come under the Hyde Amendment to a firm understanding and agreement. And I just wanted that to continue in this bill.
The pro-life members of the House support the Stupak-Pitts Amendment. Is that right?
That is correct.
But you don't?
I don't think this pro-life or pro-choice is the right word. I think it is, to me, I'm as pro-life as anyone else. And so I think that's a wrong characterization, if you don't mind my saying so. But I understand why you're using it, so please proceed.
So why aren't you with the other pro-life members of Congress who are supporting Stupak-Pitts?
Because it goes beyond the principled compromise of the Hyde Amendment. It places a discrimination upon lower-income women. And therefore, how we had originally passed this bill out of committees to bring to the floor of the House, where the Hyde Amendment would continue. And it did it by ensuring that if any woman had wanted to buy a plan that had that rider in it, that her premium she were paying for that plan already would be put in a separate account, and only that private money could be used. I thought it was a fair, correct way to go forward. Only private money is being used. Only private money. Why should we then make someone else pay additional money, and that would discriminate against lower income?
Are you in favor of the Senate version of Obamacare?
No, I think the Senate version was useful in getting us to conference. And while there are some good things in it that, in fact, might even be better, a few, than are in the House bill. For example, it would move up that insurance companies could not deny people, particularly children is what I was most concerned about, for pre-existing conditions to 2011. I think we had it 2012 or 2013. It moved it a year too earlier. What's wrong with it is in a number of areas.
What's the biggest problem you have with the Senate Obamacare bill?
Is that it doesn't begin to lower the cost on premiums in Pennsylvania like our plan did. See, in Pennsylvania, as you probably well know, Dimitri, two companies have 70% of all private health care plans. In fact, across America, the Department of Justice criteria for non-competitive markets, that is a monopoly, basically, is for 94% of all health care plans. And so it's hard to get a fair price because they control it. And they did nothing like we did to help address that, nothing even close as to what we tried to do. What we said is, let's have a plan out there. One that is a choice, is not funded by the government, but it doesn't pay $23 million to a CEO or $70 million for severance pay. It doesn't pay for advertising costs. And it has to live or die on those who join it, the premiums of copay. But because we don't have all these other costs, the cost will be less. In fact, the Congressional Budget Office said if we do have what has become called the public option, the decrease in premiums in Pennsylvania will be 25% by 2016. The Senate bill does not do that. In fact, it's kind of strange. The Senate bill, by the excise tax they do, this is a second aspect of it that worries me, on health care plans that they started calling Cadillac plans. Unfortunately, since it's indexed to consumer price index, the rise of inflation, 2% a year, and not healthcare index, 8%, soon you're going to be pulling in the Chevy plans. And by 2019, 1/3 of all plans will be pulled into this 15% or so excise tax. That's going to hit middle America pretty darn hard. Now, there's other aspects of where it discriminates a bit against hiring lower income because the employer mandate is much weaker. So that if somebody doesn't hire anyone who is less than 400% poverty level, you don't get penalized if you don't provide health care. The reason is the way the strange thinking in the Senate side did things is, wait a minute, if the government's going to subsidize someone up to 400%, and you, the healthcare company, doesn't provide healthcare, then you're going to have to help pay for that. Well, that initiates some thinking of not hiring those types of individuals for the jobs. We're kind of perverse, backwards thinking. In short, I wish I had been in the Senate, Dimitri. You know, I remember my opponent throughout the summer and even September saying all the options are on the table. No, I would have been there in January, February, March shaping that bill, much as I am on two subcommittees on health care, one for small business and one for education and labor, the workers, and then for small business, because 90% of all Pennsylvanians work in a small business, and I helped shape that bill. You know, small businesses in our bill, across Pennsylvania, they pay on average 18% more for their health care today than for a large corporation like Boeing or something. And the reason is they can't spread the risk. You've got one person out of 20 who has a cancer or something, the premiums shoot up for everybody. And so we let them put their people into national pools to spread the risk.
All right, Joe,
90% of all people are in a small business. That's why it's so beneficial for Pennsylvanians to have this bill.
All right, we have to take a short break, and I want to continue with you, of course. Congressman Joe Sestak is my guest. He would like to get the Democrat nomination for Senate. The primary is coming up, not too distant future. Phone number is 412-333-KDKA. That's 412-333-5352. You can also go online, KDKRadio.com, click Dollar Bank Instant Access to send a question to our guest. Dimitri Guest hosting for Mike Pintek, News Radio 1020, KDK.
Weekdays 9 to noon. Go inside local politics.
Before they bought a 52-inch TV for the folks at TSA to watch in their break room, all they had to say was,
have you seen all the empty TV sets that are off in the closed-down wing of the airport? Why don't we just grab 2 of those?
So for folks who say we're talking about pennies, you are absolutely right. But pennies add up to quarters that add up to dollars, and here we are at a $1.4 trillion deficit.
The Inside Story with Marty Griffin.
Because they needed a new TV.
News Radio 1020, KDKA.
KDKA all-day AAA traffic powered by Bowser Subaru. Seeing a bit of traffic on the Parkway East on the inbound side. Right around Edgewood, Swissvale, you get a little bit of congestion as you head into the tunnels, then move through in pretty good shape into the city. On the Parkway West, not a problem on the outbound side heading to the airport. That looks like a good ride for you right now. No delays. And then on the inbound side, a little slow about halfway down the hill into the tunnels for that ride. 28, a bit of congestion between the Heinz plant up to around the Etna area. Just sort of pockets of some slow traffic through that area, but not too bad. Your next AAA traffic update at 6:32 from the PennDOT Information Center. I'm Bonnie Diver on News Radio 1020 KDKA.
It's PenTech Tonight. Mike PenTech. Talking to you, Pittsburgh. News Radio 1020 KDKA. Filling in, Dimitri Vassilaris.
After the 7 o'clock news, we're going to be talking about the NFL and can games be fixed? Apparently, a Pittsburgh Steeler thinks they can, and he might be right. So we'll be talking about that. Can the fix be in the NFL? My guest right now is Congressman Joe Sestak, and he is running against Arlen Specter. He would like the Democrat nomination for Senate. The primary is when in May, Joe?
May 18th. May 18th, Dimitri.
Okay, great. Now, a couple of the questions I have here for you. Secretary of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano, do you think she should resign?
You know, I think we have to look at that remark she said and quite frankly say, what gives? No, I don't think she should automatically resign, but I think there should be some real questioning about how could anyone make that statement. Look, Dimitri, I was stationed at the Pentagon when 9/11 happened. I headed the Navy anti-terrorism unit. I was on the ground for a short period of time when the war began, and I actually voted against the Republican amendment, and was one of only 68 Republicans that did, that forbade the use of wide whole-body imaging, you know? So I'm very concerned about Homeland Security, and I don't understand that. But I also believe that I want someone to sit back in administration and say, well, wait a minute, is she got the whole act together here? And I want to make sure on that. But I'm not about to say in one statement, I'm going to call for her resignation. I felt that way about Mr. Rumsfeld, by the way. I never called for his resignation. I violently disagreed with going that tragic war of it. But I called upon the president to review what he did and say, is this the right individual to take us forward?
The Obama administration is treating terrorists like criminals and allowing them to have their rights under the Bill of Rights. Do you think that the terrorists should be treated as enemy combatants or as criminals and afforded all the protections of the United States Constitution?
Well, let me make sure I understand. President Bush tried 200 terrorists within our United States civil court system, criminal court system. Now, I think President Obama is about to bring one forward. So you're asking me, do I agree that President Obama and President Bush should have brought forward 201 terrorists to be tried in the U.S. criminal court system? Is that correct?
Well, I didn't even bring up Bush because I don't really care about Bush. I'm asking about...
we have to, because sometimes people point to Mr. Obama as always doing something different than his predecessor.
Sir, is that a yes or a no? Do you agree?
The answer is absolutely. I support closing that Gitmo that creates more terrorists outside its walls than you can hold inside. And we've waited 8 years to bring some of these terrorists to justice. And I want them thrown away into jail or given the death penalty, whatever's appropriate. And if our ideals that I fought for 31 years in this U.S. military, the rule of law, not of men, that we can't believe that our criminal court system that already dealt with 200 terrorists can't deal with one more. It wasn't the nation that I was defending if we can't bear that up.
Our suspect who tried to blow up that Delta plane, do you think he should have been treated as a military combatant and or do you think that it's a good idea for him to have a defense, a public defender, and to plead the fifth so he does not have to divulge any information if he doesn't want to?
You know, I've always kind of been feeling we've put these terrorists on too much of a footing to say they're warriors. I really do. But number two, if we had an inkling that this man had any sort of real intelligence to give us, I would be supportive of, under the Military Act, of letting the military first interrogate him and then passing him over as necessary to the civil side. But this is an individual that had no ties or into trying to get into the real al-Qaeda leadership, which really isn't in Yemen. Yes, we've got to deal with that, and we are, but it's still in Pakistan, where our inspectors vote, and President Bush took us to a tragic misadventure in Iraq, and now we have a safe haven for in Pakistan for al-Qaeda. That's what I want to get to. This guy here, let's take him to court and let's deal with it very quickly.
My guest,
but if we don't start dealing with that al-Qaeda in Pakistan that's planning against us, like because of that tragic war in Iraq, we let it spiral downward. That's where the damage to our future can be.
All right, we're going to take a short break here. Congressman Joe Sestak is my guest, and he would like to get the Democrat nomination for United States Senate. Phone number is 412-333-KDK. That's 412-333-5352. Dimitri guest hosting for Mike Pintek, News Radio 1020, KDK.
Oakmont Bakery. The family and staff at Oakmont Bakery would like to thank you, the valued customers, for a successful 2009 and send a New Year's wish your way. May your 2010 be filled with love from family and friends, peace within your heart, faith to guide your way, wisdom to discern His will, hope to make it through each day, God's Word to light your path, rainbows to let you know there is a tomorrow, a tear to show compassion, but most of all, a heart to hold His love. Oakmont Bakery is closed today, but will reopen tomorrow at 6 a.m. This year, allow Oakmont Bakery to be your destination for a relaxing European coffee and pastry while enjoying free Wi-Fi in a cozy leather chair by the fireplace. Check it out online at oakmontbakery.com. And remember, at Oakmont Bakery, we create delicious memories.
Dimitri, live and dangerously local. We are talking with Congressman Joe Sestak. He would like to replace Arlen Specter in the United States Senate. More with this in a bit. If you'd like to join in, 412-333-KDKA. Live and dangerously local. Dimitri for Mike Pintek, News Radio 1020, KDKA.
From the Lexus of North Hills studios, News Radio 1020 KDKA. Local news fast, first, now.
From the KDKA News Center, I'm Matt Del Signor. A winter weather advisory is in effect through Sunday night at 6. Snowfall is going to be steady throughout the weekend with 4 to 8 inches possible, and wind chills could drop below zero later tomorrow. No word yet on what caused a deadly fire in Sheridan. Lucretia Mitchell died inside her home on Fairdale Street this morning. Pittsburgh police are investigating a murder-suicide in Beachview that happened just hours into the new year. They say William Murray and Lelanaya Ratchko had been drinking, and Murray killed Ratchko with a bat before taking his own life. A suicide bombing has killed at least 75 people watching a volleyball tournament in the town northwest of Pakistan, in northwest Pakistan. It appears to be retaliation against residents who form militias to drive out militants. And intelligence officials say President Obama is reviewing reports from Homeland Security about apparent failures that preceded the attempted Detroit jetliner bombing.
News Radio 1020 KDKA. AAA traffic and AccuWeather together guaranteed.
It's 6:31 and Bonnie Diver has KDKA all-day AAA traffic powered by Bowser Subaru.
Things moving along in pretty good shape in most areas. We see a little bit of volume picking up on the Parkway East on the inbound side into the tunnels. Right around Edgewood, Swissvale, you start to see a little bit of traffic. And then on the outbound side, just the same thing in front of the tunnels, a couple of brake lights. Parkway West moving in good shape in either directions, out towards the airport or in towards the tunnels there into the city. And on 28, not a bad ride for you. A little bit of congestion through there, just some traffic, and kind of go with the flow, and you're in good shape. Your next AAA traffic update at 6:46 from the PennDOT Information Center. I'm Bonnie Diver, News Radio 1020 KDKA.
It's 24 at Pittsburgh International. Here's AccuWeather's Dave Bowers.
Well, Brisk becoming quite cold tonight with flurries and heavier snow showers, coating to an inch or two accumulation, a low about 16. And it's going to be blustery and very cold all weekend long. We'll continue to see flurries and snow showers Saturday and Sunday, picking up another inch or so. High both days only near 20. For AccuWeather, I'm meteorologist Dave Bowers on News Radio 1020 KDKA.
It's the GMC holiday event. Qualified buyers can get 0%.
2 next news at 7. Breaking news at once from the KDKA News Center. I'm Matt Del Signor on the Voice of Pittsburgh. News Radio 1020 KDKA.
I'm John Shumway. Monday on the KDKA Morning News, Steelers-Dolphins. We'll take you inside the locker room for a reaction. Plus, Larry joins us live from Florida. And keeping your New Year's resolution, we've got expert advice to help. Join us weekday mornings 5 until 9. Now, back to the Mike Pintek Show on News Radio 1020 KDKA.
Dimitri guest hosting for Mike. My very special guest is Congressman Joe Sestak. He would like to get the Democrat nomination for United States Senate. Congressman, I want to make sure that I understand your position here. Right before the break, the terror suspect who tried to blow up the plane over Detroit, if I understood you correctly, you have no problem with him being in federal court as opposed to being treated as a combatant or being in military court because you believe he has no real ties to Al-Qaeda. Is that essentially your position?
No, the last part was wrong. We think that he has some ties to there, but we've handled many such instances, several instances, and thrown them right into a criminal court and throwing the keys away upon them. So I am very supportive of that.
I'm a little confused.
Now, if we felt that there was that this had been someone that we knew that for years and years had been in the deep bowels of things, we do provide that when we, for example, we capture somebody overseas, that the military has the right to interrogate him, and then we can hold him over the criminal system. People have to keep in mind the military system has failed twice. The Supreme Court has twice said these courts don't stand. And so this is why those terrorists are never brought to justice. Now, the third thing you have to remember is in the military system, you get almost the same rights as you do in the court system. In the civilian court system, they're public. You watch them. The press can see them. They have the same classified rules as you do in the civilian court. And so they're almost very, very similar. The problem is the Bush administration went way too far and just let hearsay of anybody happen. When I was on the ground in Afghanistan, I can remember that the soldiers brought in, special forces, a couple people, and one of them, after a while, was banging his head against the barricade there. And I said that evening, I said, hey, what gives with this guy? He said, look, we're giving $2,000 bounty to anybody, to the chieftains if they call him a Taliban or an Al-Qaeda guy. This is just a local guy who's having a mental issue, and they give him to us, so we got to take him. Look, if that guy gives us hearsay like that, our courts of law are stand better than that. This is a guy who had a mental issue. I'm sure eventually he might have gone to Gitmo, and eventually they figured that out. But I have to tell you, we're a rule of law, not of hearsay.
So you don't believe this guy is much of a threat? He was isolated?
Not at all. That's not what I said. Look, I was head of the Navy's anti-terrorism unit. I worked very hard in the interagency system, and I worked for President Clinton as Director of Defense Policy. I worked with Richard Clark and many others to try to initially address in the 90s this issue. We, before 9/11, liked the wars over there. We liked away games. After 9/11, we have home games. And there's a proper balance we have to have, and it's got to be a change between civil rights. That's going to be a bit different than it was before when we weren't at war, so to speak, here. No, I am supportive of the stringent type of approaches. That's why I voted that it's not an invasion of privacy to have wide-body imaging there. One of the few representatives that took that stand, despite the ACLU to the NRA saying don't vote for it. No, I stand up very strongly that the number one duty of our nation is security of our citizens.
Do we have the right?
Security has to properly balance, how do we get these guys into jail, throw them away, or the death penalty, whatever the jury decides.
Well, before we get to that, let's see if we can find him guilty. But the question that I have is that I don't understand, and again, I need your help with this to help me understand clearly what your position is. It would seem to me that it would be to America's best interest, in America's best interest, to be able to interrogate this suspect, have CIA interrogators find out what exactly he does know and what exactly his contacts have been in Yemen, and get as much information out of him as we can, because my guess is that neither you nor I know what he might know.
Look,
so why won't you support that?
If they had decided they needed to do that, I'd be very supportive of it. If we find out they made a mistake, they made a mistake. I said very clearly, the law provides that you can interrogate an individual deemed to be an enemy combatant or whatever with the military first or the CIA first. I'm very supportive of this, but I've a little bit of research, and I actually looked into this. I spent about 4 hours trying to find out why they didn't, and the little bit of information I had, because we're not down in Washington, was, look, they kind of quickly knew that they could try this guy with no problems because it was in his lap and all, and that there was no belief that he was going to be giving us, for the little bit of time, the history they looked up upon, that he had deep ties to the al-Qaeda type of leadership. Now, I am not opposed whatsoever that if we deem that the CIA or the military should have first look at any of these individuals, that they should. I just don't know, as you seem to suppose, that they've made a wrong decision on this.
Well, no,
I don't know for sure. I'm not at all opposed to what the law provides for them to look at someone who you want to characterize as any combatant, to having the first shot at him. Not with the waterboarding of the torture, though.
So would you consider this guy an enemy combatant?
You know, that's a term, as you well know, that the Bush administration invented. We never had that term before.
What would you call him?
I would call him a terrorist. A person who we should throw the key away or should be given the death penalty, whatever, for whatever he did, and be brought in under our laws. Now, if there is information to be gained that we can get from somebody, by all means have the CIA interview him first or second. I think that what's happened here in a more important venue has shown that we still don't have our interagency system working well.
I agree with you.
The information is out there. When I went to Congress, I arrived just as the 9/11 Commission finished a study, or about a year later, I should say, on the 9/11 Commission's recommendations. There was like 27 F's, C's, and D's of the Bush administration. I have voted for an increase and pushed hard for increases every year for Homeland Defense monies to be done. And so, no, do not. I believe there's the right for the CIA and others. But to cast an aspersion that they made the wrong decision right now, I've tried to look into it. It doesn't look like they did.
Okay, well, then let me ask you this. Since you've identified him as a terrorist, and that's what you just called him, not enemy combatant, but a terrorist, shouldn't we then be automatically interrogating every terrorist to decide what he does know and then doesn't know, and then decide whether to put him in federal court or military court?
You know, I don't see if they look at it and make a decision that they don't need to, then let's make sure that I hope they made the right decision. I assume, which is always bad to do, that and as I said, I've already spent some time trying to find this out, that the interagency made a interagency decision on the best way to do it. But here's what I also know: I can't understand how come we have hundreds of terrorists sitting down in Gitmo without being brought to trial and put to the death penalty or thrown away with a key in jail forever. You know, we have evidence that we can move forward, and they tried to do it twice under the military tribunals, and military tribunals threw it out. All right? So the Supreme Court threw it out. What we have to do is move justice along, because there's too many people waiting to see these individuals brought to justice. And that's what I want to do. Look, our nation is founded upon the rule of law, not of men. And it's founded upon the belief that those laws can withstand anything. And so I am very much for bringing these people into court and getting it done.
Would you have any problem transferring the Gitmo prisoners to Pennsylvania prisons?
None at all. I've said that before. Here's why. My gosh, we have several hundred terrorists in prisons right now in America, and you know that. And we've never had one prisoner ever escape from Supermax or Fort Leavenworth or ever where we kept them. So, you know, in my mind, the Bush administration, President Bush in 2006, on June 24th, as I remember, actually made a speech saying we should have these individuals brought to the United States eventually and tried in civilian courts. He believed that eventually our laws are the laws that this nation's founded upon. And to believe the U.S. military, to believe these Supermax prisons, whichever one you place in, can't hold them during the trial, my gosh. And they're placed in isolation, my gosh. We can handle this.
What about Afghanistan? All right. What about Afghanistan? Can we handle that? Did you support the 30,000 troop surge that the president asked for?
Yes, sir, I did.
What's the end game?
And I know this is going to present me political difficulties, and you know that. But you know what? It's the right thing. Hey, look. It's not about Afghanistan. I support the president's plan, but I support it because it's not about Afghanistan. As the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff said 2 years ago because of Iraq, we have spiraled downward, and it's so hard to pull up. It's about Pakistan and the al-Qaeda that are in a safe haven there. If Pakistan becomes a failed state, with a safe haven for al-Qaeda and 2,000 nuclear-trained scientists from the most radical Islamic universities in the world, access to radioactive material and to its knowledge, then this global war of terror. And the cost attendant to that 5 years from now will be so great. I want, however, and I've written this to the president, where we are promised, and when I was in the Clinton administration, I wrote the National Security Strategy of Engagement, or took other people's good ideas and tried to put it together, of an exit strategy. That is, benchmarks that measure success and failure. Good warriors do that all the time in strategy.
What's the benchmark? Success? Then what's the benchmark to get out of Afghanistan?
Here they are. You know, these are on the Broadway. We know there's only several hundred al-Qaeda that are in Pakistan, none in Afghanistan. We also know we need the Pakistanis to move from South Waziristan to North Waziristan and to move towards where they are. Is that occurring? Because if it isn't, and the costs become more than the benefit, then you might exit to an alternative, or just to an alternative strategy, a longer range type of intelligence surveillance, and then you intervene when you need to. But right now, in my assessment, having gone through the classified report, having been on the ground in Afghanistan, having done the retaliatory strikes, having served at the White House and watched the decision, is there is a window of opportunity to have a cooperation with Pakistan that they will not by themselves unless we are on the other side. As Secretary Gates said in a hearing that I was at last month, in December, closing the border so that the Taliban and the al-Qaeda don't cross back into Afghanistan. It's a closure movement. It's a pincher movement, so to speak, figuratively, as we convince Pakistan to continue to move up into North Waziristan and into the al-Qaeda. Is it going to be challenging? Yes. Are there costs? Yes. But I believe we have an opportunity here where it will be much less costly and much more secure for America than just saying it's over. And I strongly believe that.
How long will we end up being in Afghanistan?
It's a very good question, and no warrior can ever say anything's perfectly sure.
When would you like us out?
What I said last March in an open an interview after a hearing, a private hearing with the administration, and after the review, is probably about 3 to 5 years we'll do it. Look, we have to leave behind in Afghanistan the probability that al-Qaeda may not go back. The problem is we can't, and I think this administration may be relying a bit too much on, and shouldn't rely upon, the central inept, corrupt government there. It should be relying upon the Taliban, who 70%, let me be clear on this, 70% of the Taliban, 70% of the 20,000 Taliban in Afghanistan are literally there for a wage. Those people make 3.5 times what a policeman makes in Afghanistan. And so when you see these efforts to wean them away to get down to 6,000 that probably have to be eradicated also, you want to leave behind a probability al-Qaeda may not ever come back. And so it's more the local tribal chiefs, it's more the local warlords that I think we want to leave behind a probability, because Afghanistan has spiraled so far downward. Nation building as a whole is beyond the cost that we could bear. It's our security and the al-Qaeda that threaten us from planning. They're in a safe haven where they're not disturbed, that we have to be concerned about first and foremost.
All right, Congressman, I know we only have X amount of time, X amount of your time. We appreciate it greatly. We had you for about 45 or so minutes, and I've used up all that time with you. Fascinating talking with you, truly is. We have folks who would like to talk with you.
I could stay a little bit longer if you needed it.
Are you sure? I don't want to put you on the spot here.
No, it's fine. The only thing is, I absolutely can. Look, I want, you asked me why I'm running. I think too many politicians, and this is what's harmed our nation, aren't willing to say what they're for or what they're not for. And what you provide me is the opportunity to let them know that I am going to tell you what I'm for. And I'm not in it for my job. I'm in it for principle and what I believe. And so I thank you for the opportunity. I'll be happy to take questions.
Excellent. Let's start with Tom in Hampton. You're on with Congressman Joe Sestak. Your question, please.
Congressman Sestak, I met you briefly at the Netroots convention in July or August.
Hi, Tom, and it's Joe, please.
Joe, and I asked you about single payer. I know it's off the table right now, but it's what I want to say is that it's alive in the state legislature, and I would like you to tell me if you'll support the opt-out so that states like Pennsylvania can pursue single payer at a statewide level. And I'd like you to explain a little better to me. Still, I don't understand exactly why you don't support single payer.
Absolutely. Can you explain what you mean by opt-out? You don't mean the what you mean is if the Pennsylvania decides to go single payer, could they do it? Is that correct? Would I support it?
That's what I mean. I'm not using the right term.
Absolutely. In the first half, and I'll try to be cut to the chase so that we can get more questions, is there was a Kucinich amendment that I voted against initially to permit Pennsylvania or any state to opt in if they selected to, because in that amendment, and again, I'm happy to send it to you, it had a line that said, oh, by the way, if the care wasn't provided that you needed, for example, cancer, my daughter's brain cancer treatment, she could not get it from a private plan. And I asked Dennis specifically, a 3 a.m. vote, so he said yes. So I would support it. If the state of Pennsylvania decided that's the way they wanted to go, I would support the state of Pennsylvania going that way. As long as a person had a choice that if the treatment wasn't provided for their child, they could go somewhere to get that in a private way.
Excellent.
Number two.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish, sir, and then we'll take a break. Go ahead, Congressman. Congressman? I'm sorry, Congressman, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, please do number two, and then we'll take a short break.
Let me do number two, and then come back if you want to. Number two is the reason I think those who argue for single payer have very good reasons to do it. The reason I support what I have done is I believe eventually the market, if it's fair and transparent, which it isn't today, will ultimately give us a more affordable type of health care. And I believe that because the single payer systems like in England, we subsidize. They buy their drugs for 1/3 the cost from our U.S. pharmaceuticals than we pay. And that's wrong. And I would vote, and the Senate didn't. Democrat and Republican, Alan Specter and others, have been supportive over the years of not permitting the reimportation of U.S. drugs we sell overseas for the same price. Second is I've come from the U.S. Navy, and they were wonderful. But I watched us buy ships from single shipyards, and the cost of a destroyer went from $1.2 billion to $5.5 billion because we didn't have fair competition. So ultimately, I think if you are able to affect a fair, transparent marketplace to give health care, and we don't have that today, but if you are with this public option and other means, then I believe in the longer term you're able to control costs better.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Congressman. Take a short break, and then we'll take some more calls. Dimitri guest hosting for Mike Pintek, News Radio 1020, KDKA.
Every morning, Pittsburgh wakes up with the KDKA Morning News with Larry Richard and John Shumway. They sure caught Larry King's attention.
A real, sincere, involved conversation. Another thing, I thoroughly enjoy it.
So when you were growing up in Brooklyn, did kids tell you had a big mouth?
John, do me a favor.
Yeah.
Say goodbye.
Okay. Weekdays 5 to 9. It's the KDKA Morning News. News Radio 1020.
One of the great radio call letters, KDKA.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First up at auction, we have here a very rare Ming vase from the Ming Dynasty. We will start the bidding at free. Do I hear free?
Free? I'll take it.
Sold to the young lady in the front row for $0.
Sweet.
Free is better. Do your simple federal return for free at TurboTax.com. It's free to prepare, free to print, and free to e-file. No wonder TurboTax is the most trusted brand of tax software. Visit TurboTax.com today. Choose easy. Trusted brand claim based on survey July 2009.
It's the GMC holiday event. Qualified buyers can get 0% APR or big cashback offers on all remaining 2009 models. Visit GMCdealer.com. Length of contract limited. Take delivery by 1/4/10. See dealer for details.
KDKA all-day AAA traffic powered by Bowser Subaru. Things moving along in pretty good shape on most of the roadways. Not seeing any tie-ups or delays on the Parkway West, Parkway East. 28 looks like a good ride if you're heading up from the 31st Street Bridge all the way up to Etna. And no problems on 65 at the Parkway North right now up around 79. Of course, we will be having some heavier traffic throughout the weekend. Expect to seeing some of our college students heading out or coming back into the city over Pitt or any of the other schools there in the next few days. So we'll have some heavier traffic on those major major roads. Your next AAA traffic update at 7:06. This report brought to you by GMC. From the PennDOT Information Center, I'm Bonnie Diver, News Radio 1020, KDKA.
He's Pittsburgh's nighttime umpire, calling them like he sees them.
Personally, I think we got hosed on that call.
It's PinTech tonight. News Radio 1020, KDKA. Once again, Dimitri Vassalaros.
My guest is Congressman Joe Sestak, and we have a lot of folks who want to talk with him. Let's get to as many callers as we can. Next up, Dale Carnegie, your question, please, for Congressman Joe Sestak.
Yes, very quickly. I must be quite blunt because it needs to be said. Number one, you don't sound any different. You're bad-mouthing, what's his name, around the bush. It's politics as usual. I like to be refreshed by not even talking about it. Just do your own thing. And secondly, this business about we need to go to war, we need to do this, like as though we got money to spend. We're going to the moon where nobody lives and grandma can't even buy medicine. Happy, healthy New Year. Now get with it.
Lovely. Would you like to respond to that? Congressman Sestak.
I'm sorry. I think I caught the first part. Look, here's what I firmly believe, is that I'm not just a sailor. I honestly believe you have to look at your wake and see where you came from. And then say, okay, where do we need to go? I went down to Washington, D.C. 3 years ago after leaving the military because I honestly believe there's a difference between what President Bush was doing and what I thought needed to be done. Now I'm running against Arlen Specter. And what I believe is, I honestly believe the lack of accountability for Pennsylvania's working families must be reversed in the policies that Arlen Specter's Republican stewardship in Washington, D.C. pursued. There's a contrast between them. I'm not talking about him personally. I respect his public service, but his vote, he said he's proud of his votes. I'm proud of my votes. You, Dimitri, on here, pushed me hard on my votes. But I want to make sure people understand that they have a choice. I believe very strongly that the policies that I am supportive of, you asked me why I'm a Democrat, investing in people, education, health, their small businesses, 90% of all people work in small business, is different from where Arlen Specter has. I also think there's a difference in our approach. He said it very clearly. He switched parties because he had a poll that he couldn't win against a Republican primary. Since then, he switched his position on public option, Defense of Marriage Act, card check. And so, in my mind, I just want you to know there's a difference. It's not us personally. It's how he voted. It's how he decides to vote. And I intend to be principled. I wasn't sure what his second one was, though.
Frankly, I wasn't sure either. One last question. If you could if you could change one vote that you have done in Congress, what vote would that be?
Actually, I can't think of one I would change. I really don't. I spent hours on every vote. For example, this amendment on wide-body imaging, it wasn't, people didn't think, it was one amendment. And I remember for an hour and a half listening to people and what they thought from ACLU to, as I said, NRA. No, I'm very supportive of all the votes that so far I've had. And I'm, people will differ from me. That wonderful man who was on about single payer, I got to tell you, I held a whole day seminar at Swarthmore College in single payer. They have very many good viewpoints. But once they come down on it, I can't tell you I'm always right. But I work myself to a logical of why I ended up here. And that gentleman who just spoke up and said, trust me, it'll be nothing personal about my adversary, my opponent. It'll purely be that there's a difference of how we voted. And he gave 2,000 votes to President Bush. I disagreed with almost all those votes of his. But that doesn't mean that I'm not proud of my votes. He said he's proud of his. And I intend to draw that contrast, but also to tell everyone, I believe in this in Afghanistan. I believe in this in healthcare and public option. And I believe in this in education. And because Pennsylvania is now the second oldest state in the union, kids aren't staying. We had 18% increase in job growth in the last 30 years. The rest of the nation did 50% job growth. There's a different way to do things in the future. I respect Arlen, but the time has come for change, a generational change in energy, a generational change in new ideas, and I intend to fight and work hard for that like I did in my district.
Congressman Joe Sestak, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your time and your frank answers, and I wish you well and hope to get you back on again.
Dimitri, thank you for the time, and I truly enjoyed this because I do serve as a public servant. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great New Year, sir. Congressman Joe Sestak there, folks.